And I also was shown some aspects of my future life. And it showed me that I was going to have a somewhat troubled life early on, and that I would have problems again in my 30s and 40s, but in my 50s, everything would be great. Everything would be great. Like everything I had struggled with for all of my lifetime before then would be the catalyst to help me be a whole being here. Hi, my name is Kim. I am a near death like experiencer. I don't believe that I truly died during my experience, but it happened quite a long time ago in the spring of 1972. I was 8 years old at the time. I wasn't going through any sort of traumatic experience. In fact, it all started when I was kneeling or squatting, I should say, next to a small stream. I was with my sister so I was 8, she was 6 years older than me, so maybe she was 14 or something like that. And she was off with friends. She was supposed to be babysitting me. Uh, and she was probably off with friends smoking in the train trestle or something. Here I am, this little 8-year-old girl. I was with no one else at the time. And I was throwing pebbles into a small stream. The pool of water that I was throwing these pebbles into was fairly undisturbed, but there was water running down the stream and over rocks in other places. So I'm throwing these pebbles in this stream, squatting beside the creek, as we used to call it. Um, and I was really mesmerized by the way the ripples were playing on the water. And I just thought it was the most beautiful thing. It was a sunny day. Um, and I just was really, really mesmerized by the ripples from the stones being tossed in. And the next thing I know, there was no transition. It really was just the next thing I know, I am outside of myself, my little 8-year-old self, and I'm looking at myself squatted by the creek. I have little, braided pigtails and, Bobo sneakers and stuff. And I was absolutely engulfed in the most profound sense of despair and disappointment. I had never, and I don't think still to this day, have I ever experienced that kind of disappointment. And I remember saying, but there's really no speaking at this point. Oh my God, no, you didn't, you did not make me come back here. Please tell me you did not make me come back here. This is so awful. I don't want to be here. I want to be back home. Please take me back home. And I heard a voice which told me it's not going to be this bad this time. I was like, yeah, no, it's terrible being here. Very, very profoundly disappointed is the only way I can put it. And so this voice tells me it's not going to be as bad. I then had a sense that I had lived many, many, many lifetimes, more than I was wanted to live, really. I don't know where that leaves me, but I mean that was the sense I had. And um it just was like just it was like someone ripped my heart out. So anyway, the next thing I know, I was in this black space. and and Betty, I have watched a couple of your interviews or listened to a couple of your podcasts, and I know that you have said in the past, heaven's boring. Well, I can remember the thought coming to my mind that, oh, you would think this is so boring, being in this black space with nothing to do, but it's anything but boring. And I can only describe it as black velvet bliss. It truly was the most blissful experience. Nothing compares on earth. Nothing compares on earth. And while I was in this black velvet bliss, just enveloped in this blissful feeling that I could have stayed in for millennia, I know that there was a second entity there with me. And I don't know. I have a feeling that this entity has been with me for many, many, probably my whole existence, many, many lifetimes. We're like two peas in a pod, and um, we're there. But I somehow felt that I was and without having an ego, I somehow felt that I was the boss of the two of us. And that person was sort of this, or being, whatever, was sort of a subordinate. I called the shots, so I'm really not sure who that was. Maybe it's someone in my current sphere of family and friends. I don't know. I felt very, very close to them. I know we've been together for forever, and they're very supportive of me, subordinate in some way, but not entirely. I don't really know how to articulate that. But okay, so I'm in this black void and we're digging it. We're suspended in this black velvet bliss. It's where we want to be. And the next thing I know, I am a tiny, tiny speck of light in this white lighted universe. The white light was just permeated everything. It was everywhere, and it was me, and I was it, and I was pure, unconditional love, and I was perfect, and I was so deeply loved and accepted. Again, a feeling like I've never felt before. And at some point, I realized that I was all knowing. I knew everything. I literally knew everything. The entire universe made complete sense to me. Everything from mathematical formulas to, scientific. I am not a left brain person. So none of that stuff resonates with me, but I knew it all, and it all made perfect sense. It all was so simple. Like, how could you not see this? It's so simple, and everything fit. Everything fit. And everything had a reason, and um everything had a reason, and everything had a purpose, including me, and including every other tiny speck of light that was in this white light. Even though it was white light, I could still see individual trillions of specks of light. And I also was given this understanding that even though I was this tiny, tiny speck of light, um, and among trillions and trillions of specks of light, that if I was not there, the entire universe would be out of balance. It wouldn't happen. It wouldn't happen because it couldn't happen because, like I said, the universe would be out of balance, and I would always be that speck of light. I always have been that speck of light, that speck of consciousness, that speck of God consciousness, because at the same time, I also knew that this universal source of love and light was me, and I was it. I know that sounds a little, well, no, not to you. But I truly was one with the universe. I know it sounds very cliche to say, but I was definitely feeling one with the universe. I think it was also just trying to kind of calm my nerves about being back on the earth plane. It meaning whatever being or consciousness was there with me. And it showed me sorry, that's my little dog. It showed me almost like a hall of records where I was looking at this enormous book. And again, this sounds so cliche, but it was like an enormous, not a scroll, but just a very old ancient book. I was shown this book. I was almost in like a hall of records, and I was shown this. And I wasn't told that that's what it was at the time, but now as I look back um, at the experience, I feel like it was my Akashic record. Like it was the record of every lifetime I've ever lived or will live, have lived. It's all happening at the same time. And, I got complete exposure to everything, every feeling, every thought, every action that I'd ever been involved in or initiated. Um, and I can't say that I really like pulled any deep information or deep knowing from that. It just was, it was like reading the Inquirer. I had to know. And I was going through this old book, and it felt very good to be reunited with this aspect of myself or these aspects of myself. Um, what else was I was there was no time sequence, so I really don't know when things happened, except that I know that the very first um thing was that I was told it wouldn't be as bad this time. So I must have had some pretty hellish experiences. And I also was shown some aspects of my future life. Again, I think it was to calm my really deep despair about being here again. Um, and it showed me that I was going to have a somewhat troubled life early on, and that I would have problems again in my 30s and 40s, but in my 50s, everything would be great. Everything would be great. Like everything I had struggled with for all of my lifetime before then would be the catalyst to help me be a whole being here now in my 50s. I'm 60 years old now. In any event, I had glimpses of um, being in a living room, a white living room with a white couch in the treetops, and there was snow outside, and I was holding a baby who I was deeply in love with, in love, but just had such a sense of love for this child and happiness. And someone that I was supposed to be a partner with was separate from the rest of the family and standing in the kitchen. Um, and then I also had a remembrance of, or offered a glimpse of the future, in that I was hugging a man who truly made me feel like I had come home. And I was very deeply in love with this man. And I also had a vision of, again, being with a man who was very, very successful at what he did. And we were very comfortable, well off. And, life was great from then on out. That was when I was supposed to be in my 50s. So I would tell you that I did have a sort of, I'll call it a traumatic childhood. I think it was probably more common than was talked about at the time. But I was the youngest of four kids. I came from an Irish Catholic background, middle class. Um, but my mother was an alcoholic, a very tragically a very severe alcoholic. She also had a really traumatic childhood, and she was also bipolar. And back in the late 60s and early 70s, I don't really think they had a way to treat bipolar disease like we now understand it. So she was in and out of the state hospital. She received electroshock therapy and everything else for her manic depression, as it was called back then. So my childhood was a little unstable. It was really unstable at points. You never really knew what was going to happen, what shoe was going to drop next. My father was completely codependent on my mother. He also drank pretty heavily, but he didn't fall into his alcoholism until after she died. So, there was several suicide attempts by her, and she died when I was 11 years old. And I think I'm fairly sure that she died from an accidental overdose of drugs and alcohol. After she died, my father just kind of went off the deep end. Um, I was the youngest of four, and in fact, there was 6 years between my sister and I. I was the youngest of four, and so I was really the only one home still at that point. I was 11, going on 12, and he just kind of he went off the deep end, and he just drank constantly. He did not drink at home. He would not bring alcohol into the house, so he was always gone, getting drunk. And so the whole 12, 13 years old was a bit of a really depressed, unstable period for me too. And I've had some periods of depression, through my adult life. I've come out of them. Um, I did have some, emotional ups and downs in my 30s. I had social anxiety, and I was thrown into this job where I had to come out of my, meet my social anxiety head on. I had to give talks, presentations. I had to act like I knew what I was talking about, all this stuff. And so the 30s was I was a young mother, and I was trying to balance all of this stuff. So, but I consider that social anxiety because it was so terrifying for me. I think that that was probably the sort of problems that I was supposed to experience in my 30s. In my 40s, I divorced my first husband, the father of my daughters, and married a man who I truly do believe now, and then that he was my soulmate. I deeply loved him, and I believe he deeply loved me. But again, he was a raging alcoholic, and we went through several years of, me being codependent and trying to be the one that he changes for, and in the process, it was a very, very turbulent time. I later met, I divorced my second husband, which I would still be married to him today if it wasn't for the problems that he had with the alcohol. I later moved away. I came back. I met a man who was very successful and made plenty of money. I actually made a decent salary back then. And yeah, we were really well off. This was when I was 52 years old. We were together for about 4.5 years, and it ended up being a very abrupt breakup, initiated by him. It sort of threw me for a loop because of the way it was done and the way he treated me, which it just was very strange. So I would say it was a bit traumatic in the way that it was done. And so now that happened when I was 58. So now I'm 60. So I think that most of the things that I was given vision to have come to pass. Although I'm really hoping that that I still do find that man who loves me unconditionally, because that was part of the vision of being, in the end, everything would be great. Do I need that? I don't know. Is that one of the reasons, one of my life reasons for being here? I don't know. To kind of confront that need because of so much, I guess, feelings of abandonment as a child, because we were told, basically told. Actually, I remember being told that what we wanted and how we felt was unimportant, and that the only thing that was important was my mother and her health by my father. So maybe that was the reason why I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out. And I really didn't talk to anybody but about this experience, certainly not at 8 years old. I was like, what the heck was that? And then I just stored it in my memory bank because I did not know how to process it. I didn't have anyone to talk to. I didn't tell anyone until I was probably, I think the first person I told was my daughter when I was like 42. And then I dabbled a little bit here and there, but quite honestly, there wasn't much about it on the internet then. And so 42, I mean, it would have been in the 90s. There wasn't much about it. But I did relay the story to a few trusted people. But I have never told my story to anyone. I still don't really know if I fully understand it. There was no death involved. Um, but at the time that I experienced the uh, vision, I was moving into a much more turbulent time in my childhood. It was turbulent before then, but it was going to go down soon. And I there was sexual abuse that started. My mother's mental health issues really, really got bad, and I just think it was overall um, a much more turbulent time. And maybe it was, my guardian angel just saying, just relax. It's all going to be okay. It's not going to be as bad as the last time, which I can't even fathom what that was like. I have no recollection of any past life, uh, but that's what I ended up with. And I mean, I wasn't given information about, you're going to have two children and you're going to live here and you're going to live there. None of that. But I was just shown these instances of, here's what's going to happen. Don't worry. See, not so bad. Not so bad. Not so bad. And then the way I woke up from this vision was by my sister coming up and tapping me on the shoulder and saying, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm okay." And I'm sure I was pretty dazed. But again, 8 years old, I didn't know how to process it. And I know that it was real because 8-year-olds don't think like that. 8-year-olds do not think like what I experienced. The all knowing, the all loving. Um, it was just such a spiritual, highly spiritual experience that it just couldn't have been conjured up in my little 8-year-old mind. I had been shown some religion. And in fact, I went to a Catholic school. So as a little schoolgirl, I was taught by nuns. Um, but religion wasn't real high priority in my family. We went to Catholic school because my mother went to Catholic school and blah blah blah. So I had a introduction to religion, but I hadn't really formed my relationship with God yet. I didn't really understand all of that. I only knew what I was told. I hadn't made any interpretations. So and nobody told me that was going to happen. So I'm not really sure what to make of it yet. Still, I do believe it was an authentic experience, and I feel blessed to have had it. I'm still not sure why I had it when I had it, and I'm still not sure that I've completely processed it, even 52 years later. So thank you for letting me share. Yeah,
All right. Thank you so much, Kim. That was wonderful.
thank
So
you.
you mentioned that this is your first time ever sharing about your experience, even though it happened 52 years ago. I wonder if maybe you can share a little bit about why now? Why do you feel called to share about it now?
Well, I have thought about the experience off and on, and quite honestly, I have taken some solace in knowing that I experienced that complete and total love and acceptance. Um, but I've never quite been able to figure it out. And so now, I've come to this point in my life, and I think I described, sort of a traumatic breakup where I really had to step back, and rethink things. Up until that point, I was a very um, sad person. I wouldn't say that I was, Eeyore or anything like that, but I had this cast of sadness over me that I could not shake. And I sometimes wonder now if that wasn't a byproduct of the sadness and disappointment I felt when I realized I was back on the earth plane, which was my first part of this memory. Um, I know that there's something much, much better than this on the other side. And so I'm not afraid to die, although I didn't die, but I sure feel like I experienced my true home and true life. So thankfully, there's more information available on the internet now than there ever was. And certainly when I was a young person and a young adult, there was no internet. So there certainly was no way to kind of figure this out or bounce it off anyone else. like I'm trying to do today. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Thanks for sharing that. I think we all are. That's our common thread that we're all trying to figure out what exactly is going on. So can you share a little bit about how that spiritual experience did it lead to other experiences in your life? I know that you kind of told us a lot about your life history unfolding, but what about your spiritual life unfolding?
Well, I will tell you, after hearing other people's experiences and how they've developed, some sort of psychic abilities and knowing and things like that, I feel like I've wasted the experience because I really don't have any psychic experiences, or let's say I'm not real intuitive necessarily, or any more than the average person, maybe sometimes, but not really. But I have had some spiritual experiences. I one really profound experience was, I had an emerald ring that my first husband, had given me. It meant a lot to me. He spent a lot of money on it. We didn't have a lot of money back then. And I lost the ring. And I was really kind of very upset about having lost this ring. And we were in the process of moving our home. And I thought, well, for sure, when I get this thing sold and everything moved out, the ring is going to show up. And lo and behold, it didn't. And I was very sad because it was the first real thing of any value he gave me. And it meant a lot to me. It was my birthstone. So months after being into the house, I remember, just really all of a sudden being very disturbed about having lost this ring again. And I ended up having a lucid dream one morning. And I knew I was dreaming, but I couldn't come out of the dream. I had this voice, this woman's voice coming to me in my head. And I knew the voice. I knew the voice. The voice was so familiar to me. I couldn't figure out who it was, could not figure out who it was. And she said to me, she had an accent. And I knew her. I knew her, but I couldn't figure out. It was driving me nuts. I couldn't figure out who this was. In any event, she says, Kimmy, go up to the attic and go to the first box of jeans you find and look in the pocket, and there you'll find your emerald ring in an Irish brogue. I literally got out of bed. It was Epiphany Sunday. I remember that. My husband was not in bed with me. He had taken the girls out for an early morning breakfast and decided to let me sleep in. I go up the attic, pull down the steps in the hallway, walk up the attic. This is a really old house. I turn the light on. There's a box standing placed right in front of me. I go to the box. I open it up. It's a bunch of jeans. I pick up the first pair of jeans. I look in the right hand pocket, and there's my emerald ring. I swear to you, this is true. And I stood there screaming, looking at this ring. At that very time, my husband was coming in with the two girls. I remember seeing my breath. It was so cold. It was Epiphany Sunday, which I think falls usually in February. I should know this, but I don't. February or March, screaming and seeing my breath in the cold attic, and telling my husband about, what had just happened. And I remember sitting on my bed and thinking, Jesus, sorry, geez, that was my mother. My mother was from Ireland, and she had an Irish brogue. I hadn't heard her voice at that point in my life for over 20 years, maybe even 25, at least 20 years. And it was such a beautiful experience that she helped me find that ring. How would I ever have known to go up to the attic and go to a specific box which would hold nothing but jeans? And when I, was able to absorb all this and think about it, I realized that when I was selling my house, I wanted to wash the kitchen floor. And my mother always would say to us, you cannot mop a floor. You have to get down on your hands and knees and wash it by hand because you won't get all the dirt. And I remember that my brother-in-law had brought me a bunch of jeans that no longer fit him. So I said, well, I'm just going to put on one of those old pairs of jeans. And I must have taken the ring off and put it in the pocket to wash the floor. When I changed out of the jeans, I didn't even wash them. I folded them back up and I put them back in the box that he gave me, put it back in my closet, and ended up moving that box of jeans with me without ever having thought another thing of it. And I didn't realize I'd put the ring there. But I got my old ring back. Beyond that, I had a premonition dream about 9/11. About a week before 9/11 happened, I had a dream that there was a skeleton plane of people who were pedaling, and there were ribbons of red, orange, and yellow coming off the back, and they were swooping in our neighborhood. And I was saying to my husband, they're going to hit a building. They're going to hit a building. They're going to hit one of our houses. This is going to be terrible. And that was the end of the dream. But a week later, 9/11 happened. And I was sad to realize some weeks later, actually, that I tied that dream to it. That's just my interpretation of it, but the timing is pretty um, unusual. Beyond that, a little bit here and there of knowing things before they happen, um, thinking of someone and then they call. But I think that's kind of normal for a lot of people. I think we have that sort of sixth sense, and we don't really develop it much. But yeah, that's about it.
Thanks so much for sharing, Kim.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed chatting with you today. I just want to see if there's anything else that you'd like to share to feel more complete about our time together.
And no, I don't think there's anything more that I want to share. I mean, I shared pretty much everything I could remember. Again, it was over 50 years ago. Um, I would love to find out, a little bit more about it. I have every intention of becoming a little bit more involved in um, the community of near-death experiencers, and just to try and work on that, understand that, and also work on my own spirituality.
We're so grateful for you, Kim. Thanks for taking
Thank
time out
you.
of your day to serve the community at IANDS. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye, Betty. Thank you.